All right, in this video, we'll begin by looking at some Echinoderm classes. We'll be looking at the two bigger classes. The first one is Asteroidia, which just means star-like or star shape. 1,500 species of these. These are what we would generally call sea stars. Their thing is that they cling to objects near the shoreline and feed off things near there. They range from 1 centimeter in length to 1 meter in size, like this giant thing here that looks like one of those old things that people would hang up on their walls for decorations. A couple things about them: they have an endoderm, or endoskeleton, excuse me, which is a living skeleton, and it is derived from the mesoderm, very similar to our own skeleton. It's made of these plates called ossicles, which is just kind of means bone, and has a liquid and solid kind of characteristic, so it has this fluidity to it, but also has structure and some rigidity as well. The water vascular system, which we talked about a little bit in the last video, you can see clearly from this very clear picture. The water vascular system is a series of canals and specialized tube feet. It forms kind of a hydraulic system for the body. It functions for locomotion and food gathering, but also some of the other functions like respiration and excretion. I think of it as like an internal circulatory system as well that is circulating all of these particles, and so it's a very very important part of every system of the sea star's body. Very similar to the sponge needing that constant water flow. They kind of have that same sort of thing with a lot more things going on besides the sponge, obviously. So as far as feeding, they have a very short esophagus but a large stomach, and in fact, they use their stomach as feeding. They will feed on mollusks and they pry the mollusk apart, and then they will evert their stomach. So think of the word invert means to turn inward, and so they turn their stomach outward. And so it's kind of like instead of swallowing food, you would just put your stomach on the plate of food and watch it digest it. That's really the only way to think about it. And so they evert their stomach into the mollusk, and this mollusk is slowly digested into some soup, and then they drink up all the soup and leave behind a shell for some kid to bring home from their vacation. And so this is what they do. They're very voracious predators and very successful predators, actually. For a nervous system, they have 3 different levels of nervous system going on. So they have the nerve ring around the oral level, but they have an upper, like a dorsal and a ventral level as well. Not a whole lot not a whole lot to say here, other than just to say their nervous system is more complicated than it would look like at first glance. They have some controlling their movement, they have some controlling their reproductive and other function, and so nervous system is a lot more advanced than it would look at first glance. And then regeneration. Um, yeah, odd looking picture here, but it shows you the thing. There's one arm left, and it was able to regenerate all the other arms. Can regenerate those lost parts, even if they're all lost, and can break off an injured arm. If an arm is causing problems, they can just cause it to kind of go away. And it must contain a portion of that central disc, again, where the brain is, and it must contain a portion of that central disc in order for regeneration to occur, because there has to be some centrality to it, obviously. And this costs a lot of energy. So for this sea star to be able to do this, it has to have a lot of energy stored up, and it obviously has to have time to do that where it's not being preyed upon itself. All right, the next class is called Opherodia. These are brittle stars, 2,000 species of brittle stars. These are the most abundant echinoderms, common in benthic and abyssal areas of the ocean. That means the very, very bottom, deepest sort bottom. Usually live in the dark areas, and they hide from light. In fact, they're either bottom feeders, where they feed on the bottom things. They're suspension feeders, where they're feeding on the stuff that's in the water column. Some of them are carnivorous. one of the predators, or one of the species, is actually an ambush predator, so it kind of lies in wait. Not sure how that works, but it does. And so the arms are set off sharply from the central disc here, so a lot different than the Asteroidia, which kind of just all the central disc is kind of joined together. Here you see very plainly set apart from that. The tube feet don't have the suckers on them that you see on Asteroidia. Uh, they're mostly used for feeding as opposed to movement, and so a little bit different sort of thing there. The arms consist of columns of articulated ossicles. I don't know if I do have that. So what I mean by that is articulated. See how each one is able to move um, independently of itself, and so very lots of joints is what articulated means. Connected with muscles, covered with plates, and so a lot of protection here, and each one of its arms can move independently. Stomach is sac-like, again, just like the other one. No intestines to speak of, and that indigestible material will just exit its mouth instead of the normal processes. Sexes are usually separate. A few of them are hermaphroditic. There's a high degree of regeneration because they will release their arms with little provocation. There's a picture of the digestive system. Um, so this is kind of like a gastrovascular cavity in a way. Not doesn't look like it has two openings that I can see. So they will drop their arm really quickly because it's a way to get away, obviously, if they're being preyed upon. And so they have a lot of regeneration that can occur in this particular species.